Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm here in my cozy little Minecraft world, just doing some side quest stuff while we dive into some absolutely wild Reddit drama. I've got a few stories lined up today that honestly made my jaw drop when I read the titles of them. Some of these are so unhinged, I had to look twice just to make sure I saw them properly. So grab whatever you're working on, get comfortable, and let's jump into some peak internet chaos. These stories are straight from the Am I the A-hole subreddit, and trust me, some of these people are definitely the a-hole, but we'll let you be the judge. Anyway, I will just say bad person for the sake of it. Alright, story number 1. Am I the bad person for telling my roommate she can't bring her emotional support peacock into our apartment? I know the title sounds fake, but I swear this is real. I'm a 24-year-old grad student sharing a 2-bedroom apartment with my roommate Jessica, who's also in grad school. We've been living together for about 8 months and things have been pretty smooth until last week. Jessica has always been a bit eccentric. She's into crystals, sage burning, the whole spiritual wellness thing. I don't judge because honestly, whatever helps you get through life, you know? But last Tuesday, she texted me saying she was bringing home her new emotional support animal and that I should prepare the living room. I figured it was a dog or maybe a cat. I was actually excited because I love animals and our lease allows pets with the right documentation. Jessica has been dealing with some anxiety issues lately and I thought having a furry companion might really help her. Then she walked through the front door with a peacock, an actual full-grown peacock with those massive tail feathers and everything. The thing was beautiful, but also absolutely enormous. She had it on some kind of leash harness situation, and it immediately started making these incredibly loud calls that echoed through our entire apartment. I just stood there staring because I honestly thought I was hallucinating. Jessica started explaining how she'd connected with this peacock at some exotic animal sanctuary and how its energy aligned perfectly with her chakras. She said her therapist recommended an emotional support animal and that traditional pets didn't speak to her spirit. The peacock immediately knocked over our coffee table with its tail feathers and then proceeded to leave droppings all over our hardwood floors. The smell was unreal. I told Jessica we needed to talk privately and suggested maybe the peacock could stay on the balcony temporarily. She got defensive and said I was discriminating against her mental health needs. She pulled out official-looking paperwork, saying the peacock was registered as her emotional support animal. I told her that even if the paperwork was legitimate, our apartment wasn't suitable for a bird that size. The peacock knocked over a lamp and started eating the leaves off my houseplants. Jessica said I was being unsupportive and that she'd already paid a $300 deposit to the sanctuary. She accused me of not taking her anxiety seriously. I explained that I wasn't questioning her mental health needs, but that a peacock in a small apartment wasn't practical or fair to the animal. Our neighbours were already complaining about the noise. The thing was literally screaming every few minutes, and it wasn't even sunset yet. Jessica started crying and said this was the first time in months she'd felt genuine peace and connection. She said if I made her get rid of the peacock, she might have a breakdown. I felt terrible, but I also couldn't live with a giant bird destroying our apartment and keeping the entire building awake. I called our landlord to ask about the pet policy, and it turns out, even with emotional support documentation, there are restrictions on exotic animals. The landlord said if the peacock wasn't gone by Friday, we'd both be evicted. When I told Jessica about the landlord's ultimatum, she completely lost it. She accused me of going behind her back and said I was ruining her healing journey. She claimed I was jealous of her spiritual growth and that my negative energy was toxic. The peacock situation got worse over the next 2 days. It destroyed our couch cushions, left droppings everywhere, and the constant noise complaints from neighbours were becoming a real problem. Our upstairs neighbour threatened to call animal control. I finally told Jessica she had to choose between keeping the peacock and keeping our apartment. She said I was forcing her to choose between her mental health and her housing. I suggested she could find alternative housing that would accommodate the peacock or look into other emotional support animals that were more apartment appropriate. She ended up taking the peacock back to the sanctuary, but she's barely spoken to me since. She's been passive-aggressive about everything from dishes to temperature control. Yesterday, she told our mutual friends that I'm an ableist who doesn't support mental health awareness. I feel awful because I know Jessica is genuinely struggling with anxiety, and I want to be supportive. But I also think bringing a peacock into a small apartment without discussing it with your roommate first is unreasonable. Some of our friends are saying I should have been more accommodating and that emotional support animals are protected. Am I the bad person for not letting my roommate keep her emotional support peacock in our apartment? Okay, that story is absolutely unhinged, and I'm honestly impressed by the commitment to the peacock situation. Like, I get that emotional support animals are important and legitimate, but there has to be some practical consideration for your living situation and your roommate. You can't just show up with a massive exotic bird and expect everyone to adapt. The fact that it was destroying their apartment and disturbing the neighbours makes this pretty clear-cut to me. Sometimes being supportive means helping someone find realistic solutions, not enabling impractical decisions. Let's move on to our next story, and honestly, this one is even wilder. Am I the bad person for exposing my sister's fake pregnancy at her baby shower? This is probably the most dramatic thing that's ever happened in my family, and I'm still processing it. My sister Rachel is 28, and I'm 31. We've always had a complicated relationship, but I never thought she'd do something this manipulative. Rachel announced her pregnancy to the family about 4 months ago. Everyone was thrilled because she'd been trying to conceive with her husband David for over 2 years. They'd been through fertility treatments and a miscarriage last year, so this felt like a miracle. From the beginning, something felt off about Rachel's pregnancy. She wasn't showing at all, even at what should have been 5 months along. When I asked about doctor appointments, she was always vague about details. She claimed her doctor preferred minimal ultrasounds and that everything was progressing naturally. Rachel has always been dramatic and attention-seeking, but I figured pregnancy could affect people differently. My mum was planning this elaborate baby shower, and Rachel was milking every moment of it. She registered for thousands of dollars worth of baby gear and kept posting about her pregnancy journey on social media. The weird thing was that Rachel never seemed to have typical pregnancy symptoms. No morning sickness, no food aversions, no fatigue. She wasn't gaining weight anywhere, except what looked like a small bump that seemed to appear and disappear depending on what she was wearing. I started getting suspicious when she posted an ultrasound photo that looked identical to one I'd seen on a pregnancy forum. When I reverse searched the image, it came up on multiple websites as a stock ultrasound photo. I screenshot the evidence, but didn't know what to do with it. Things got weirder when Rachel claimed her doctor recommended she avoid family gatherings due to her high-risk pregnancy status. She stopped coming to family dinners, but was posting photos of herself at restaurants and social events. The timeline wasn't adding up. 3 weeks before the baby shower, I decided to do some digging. I called the medical practice Rachel claimed to be using, and they had no record of her as a patient. I checked with 2 other practices in her area and got the same response. Either she was lying about her doctor or lying about being pregnant. I confronted Rachel privately and asked her directly if she was actually pregnant. She got defensive and accused me of being jealous because I'm still single. She said I was trying to ruin her happiness and that stress was bad for the baby. When I mentioned the stock ultrasound photo, she claimed it was a misunderstanding. The baby shower was planned for last Saturday. My mum had invited 50 people and spent weeks planning decorations and food. Rachel showed up wearing a dress with obvious padding underneath. The bump looked completely fake and shifted when she sat down. During the gift opening, Rachel was getting emotional about receiving baby clothes and nursery items. She kept talking about how excited she was to meet her daughter and how she could already feel her kicking. The lies were becoming more elaborate by the minute. I couldn't take it anymore. When Rachel stood up to give her thank you speech, I interrupted and asked her to explain why her medical practice had no record of her pregnancy. The room went completely silent. Rachel started stammering and claiming there must be a mistake. I pulled out my phone and showed everyone the stock ultrasound photo she'd been using. Then I asked her to explain why her pregnancy bump seemed to be movable. The confrontation got heated fast. Rachel started crying and saying I was ruining the most important day of her life. David looked completely shocked, like he was hearing this information for the first time. My mum was trying to mediate, but you could see the realization dawning on her face. Rachel finally broke down and admitted she wasn't pregnant. She said she'd been pretending because she was desperate to have a baby and thought if she acted pregnant long enough, maybe it would happen naturally. She claimed she was planning to announce a miscarriage after the shower and keep all the gifts. The aftermath was brutal. David was furious and said he felt betrayed by the elaborate deception. He moved out that night. My mum was devastated about the money she'd spent on the shower and how embarrassed she felt in front of all our relatives. Several family members left immediately after the revelation. Rachel is now saying, I destroyed her marriage and humiliated her publicly. She claims she was having a mental health crisis and that I should have handled it privately. Some family members think I should have talked to her husband first instead of exposing her at the shower, but I felt like she was scamming everyone and taking advantage of people's generosity. The fake pregnancy had been going on for months, and she was accepting expensive gifts under false pretenses. I thought people deserved to know the truth. Am I the bad person for exposing my sister's fake pregnancy at her baby shower instead of handling it privately? This story is absolutely devastating, and I feel terrible for everyone involved, especially the husband who was completely blindsided. Faking a pregnancy for months and accepting thousands of dollars in gifts is next-level manipulation. While the public confrontation was definitely dramatic, I understand the frustration of watching someone deceive your entire family. Sometimes the truth comes out in messy ways when people are pushed too far. The sister clearly needs serious help, but that doesn't excuse the elaborate fraud she was running on people who loved her. Our next story takes us in a completely different direction, and honestly, it's kind of wholesome compared to the peacock and fake pregnancy situations. Am I the bad person for refusing to switch plane seats with a family so they could sit together? I was flying cross-country last month for a work conference. I'd booked my ticket about 2 months in advance and specifically chose an aisle seat in the front section because I'm tall and need the legroom. I also have a mild anxiety issue with feeling trapped, so aisle seats help me feel more comfortable during long flights. When I got to my seat, there was already a woman sitting in it with a young kid who looked maybe 8 years old. I politely showed her my boarding pass and explained that she was in my assigned seat. She looked embarrassed and said her family had been split up during booking and asked if I'd be willing to switch seats so they could sit together. She pointed to a middle seat about 10 rows back between 2 larger passengers. I could see her husband and another child were sitting in that area. I felt bad for the family situation, but the seat she was offering was significantly worse than what I'd paid for and planned around. I explained that I'd specifically chosen my seat for the extra legroom and that I had some anxiety about being stuck in middle seats. I offered to help her ask a flight attendant if there were any other solutions or if someone else might be willing to switch. The woman got frustrated and said I was being selfish. She pointed out that her kids were well behaved and that family should be prioritized over individual comfort. She said most decent people would be happy to help a family stay together during a long flight. I acknowledged that I understood her situation was difficult, but that I'd paid extra for seat selection and had booked early specifically to avoid being stuck in an uncomfortable seat. I suggested she speak with the gate agent before boarding to see if they could accommodate her family. The woman started getting louder and attracting attention from other passengers. She said I was heartless for separating a family and that her 8-year-old was scared to fly alone. Other passengers were starting to stare, and I was feeling pressured to just give up my seat. A flight attendant came over to assess the situation. The woman immediately explained that I was refusing to let her family sit together and painted me as the villain. The flight attendant asked if I'd be willing to switch, and I explained that I'd specifically paid for my seat selection and that the offered seat was much less comfortable. The flight attendant tried to find alternative solutions, but the flight was completely full. She asked if anyone else in the area would be willing to switch, but nobody volunteered. Eventually, she told the woman that passengers weren't required to give up their assigned seats, and that she'd need to return to her ticketed seat. The woman was clearly angry as she gathered her things. She made several loud comments about selfish people and how society was falling apart. Her kid seemed confused by the whole situation, and I felt bad that he was caught in the middle of adult drama. During the flight, I kept second-guessing my decision. The family ended up being separated for the entire 5-hour flight, and I could see the mum looking stressed about her kid being alone. Part of me wondered if I should have just taken the worst seat to help them out. After we landed, several passengers made comments about the situation. One older woman said I should have been more considerate of the family. Another passenger said the mum should have planned better when booking, if sitting together was important. I've been thinking about this situation for weeks. On one hand, I paid for my seat selection and had legitimate reasons for needing that specific seat. On the other hand, maybe I could have been more flexible to help a family in need. The thing that bothers me most is that I don't think the mum handled the situation well by trying to guilt-trip me and make a scene. But I also recognise that travelling with kids is stressful, and she was probably just trying to do what was best for her family. Some friends say I was totally justified in keeping my assigned seat. Others think I should have been more accommodating since it involved children. I'm honestly not sure if I made the right call. Am I the bad person for refusing to switch plane seats with a family, even though it meant they had to sit separately? This one, honestly, could go either way, and I think it highlights how awkward these airplane situations can get. You paid for your seat selection specifically for comfort and anxiety reasons, which are totally valid. At the same time, families getting separated on flights is genuinely stressful, especially with younger kids. I think the mum handled it poorly by trying to guilt-trip and create a scene, instead of working with the airline to find better solutions. These situations are tough because nobody's really the villain, but someone always ends up feeling bad. Let me grab one more story for this first part, and this one is definitely going to make you question some people's decision-making skills. Am I the bad person for cancelling my wedding after finding out my fiancé lied about his job for 3 years? I'm 29 and my fiancé Jake is 32. We've been together for 3 years and got engaged last Christmas. The wedding was supposed to be next month, and we'd already sent out invitations and put deposits down on everything. Jake told me from the beginning that he worked as a financial advisor at a prestigious investment firm downtown. He always dressed professionally, left for work at reasonable hours, and seemed to know a lot about stocks and market trends. He paid for half of our expenses and never seemed stressed about money. I was proud of him and would brag to my friends about how successful and driven he was. When we got engaged, he insisted on paying for the more expensive wedding venue because he said his end-of-year bonus was particularly good. I thought I was marrying someone ambitious and financially stable. 3 weeks ago, I was having lunch near his office building and decided to surprise him by stopping by with coffee. I went to the floor his company was supposed to be on and asked the receptionist for Jake Morrison. She looked confused and said there was no one by that name working there. I thought maybe I had the wrong floor, so I asked building security. They checked their directory and confirmed that Jake had never been employed in that building. I was completely baffled and started wondering if I'd somehow gotten his workplace wrong after 3 years. When Jake came home that night, I asked him directly about his office location. He gave me the same address he'd always given me. I told him I'd stopped by and couldn't find him. He claimed there must have been some confusion and that maybe the receptionist was new. Something felt really off, so I decided to do some investigating. I looked up his supposed company online and called their main number. When I asked to be transferred to Jake Morrison, they said they had no employee by that name. I asked if maybe he worked under a different name or division, and they confirmed he'd never worked there. I was starting to panic because nothing was making sense. The next morning I followed Jake when he left for work. Instead of going to the financial district, he drove to a completely different part of town and parked at a warehouse complex. I watched him walk into a building that turned out to be a fulfillment center for an online retailer. He was wearing a uniform and appeared to be loading trucks. I sat in my car for 2 hours trying to process what I was seeing. My fiancé of 3 years had been lying about having a professional career. When Jake came home that evening, I confronted him with everything I'd discovered. At first he tried to deny it and claim I was mistaken. When I showed him photos I'd taken of him at the warehouse, he finally broke down and admitted the truth. He explained that he'd been working at the fulfillment center for 4 years, doing manual labor and inventory management. He said he'd lied about being a financial advisor because he was embarrassed about his job and thought I wouldn't be interested in dating him if I knew the truth. Jake said he'd been planning to eventually transition into a finance career and make the lie into reality. He claimed he'd been taking online courses and studying for certifications. He begged me to understand that he'd only lied because he loved me and was afraid of losing me. I was devastated and felt like our entire relationship had been built on deception. I asked him how he'd been able to afford his share of our expenses and the wedding costs. He admitted he'd been working overtime constantly and had taken out credit card debt to maintain the lifestyle he thought I expected. The revelation that he'd gone into debt to keep up his lie made everything worse. I realized I didn't actually know who I was marrying. If he could lie about something so fundamental for 3 years, what else had he been dishonest about? I told Jake I needed time to think and stayed at my sister's house for a week. During that time, I couldn't stop thinking about all the conversations we'd had about his fake job. He'd made up stories about co-workers and office drama. He'd pretended to have work stress about clients and market conditions. The elaborate nature of the deception felt manipulative and calculated. It wasn't just a small lie that got out of hand. He'd created an entire false identity and maintained it for years. I felt like I'd been dating a stranger. When I came back to talk to Jake, I told him I was calling off the wedding. He was devastated and promised he'd never lie to me again. He said he'd quit his job and actually pursue finance work to make things right. But I explained that the trust was completely broken. Jake accused me of being shallow and caring more about his job title than who he was as a person. He said I was proving his fears right by leaving him over something that shouldn't matter. He claimed that if I really loved him, his career wouldn't be important. But it wasn't about the job itself. I don't care if someone works at a warehouse or an office. It was about the fact that he'd lied to me every single day for 3 years. He'd let me make major life decisions based on false information about our financial situation and his character. Cancelling the wedding was expensive and embarrassing. I had to call all our guests and vendors to explain that the wedding was off. I couldn't bring myself to tell people the real reason, so I just said we'd realised we weren't compatible. Some of our mutual friends think I overreacted and that Jake's lie came from a place of insecurity rather than malice. They say everyone embellishes things when dating and that I should have been more understanding. My family supports my decision, but I still wonder if I gave up on someone who genuinely loved me. Jake has been texting me constantly, asking for another chance. He sent me screenshots of job applications he's submitted and courses he's enrolled in. He says he's willing to do anything to rebuild my trust, but I don't know if that's even possible. Am I the bad person for calling off my wedding after discovering my fiancé had been lying about his career for our entire relationship? This is absolutely heartbreaking, but honestly, I think she made the right call. 3 years of daily lies about something so fundamental isn't just insecurity, it's a pattern of deception that would be impossible to come back from. The fact that he created fake co-workers and office drama shows how elaborate and calculated this whole thing was. I feel terrible for both of them, because clearly He loved her, but love built on lies isn't really love at all. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is walk away when trust is completely shattered. Moving into our next story, and this one involves some serious family boundary issues. Am I the bad person for changing the locks after my mother-in-law used her spare key to rearrange my house while I was at work? I've been married to my husband David for 2 years, and we bought our first house about 6 months ago. It's a small 3-bedroom place, but it's ours, and I was so excited to finally have space to decorate and make our own. David's mother, Patricia, has always been very involved in his life and had some opinions about our decorating choices. When we moved in, Patricia offered to help us get settled, which I appreciated since moving is stressful. She helped us paint a few rooms and gave us some furniture from her attic. I thought we were building a good relationship, and I was happy that David's family was welcoming. About a month after we moved in, Patricia asked if she could have a spare key in case of emergencies. David thought it was a good idea since we live about 20 minutes away from his parents, and they're getting older. I agreed, but specified that the key was only for actual emergencies. For the first few months, everything seemed fine. Patricia would call before coming over and was generally respectful of our space. She'd make comments about our furniture arrangement or decorating choices, but I figured that was normal mother-in-law behaviour. Last month I started working longer hours because we're launching a new project at my job. I've been leaving the house around 7 in the morning and not getting home until after 6 most days. David works from home, so he's usually there, but he had a business trip planned for last week. On Tuesday I came home from work to find that our living room had been completely rearranged. The couch was in a different spot, we had new throw pillows, and Patricia had moved our coffee table and rearranged all the books on our shelves. There were fresh flowers on the dining table, and she'd organised our kitchen cabinets. I was completely confused and called David to ask if he'd hired a cleaning service or something. He was just as puzzled as I was, since he was 3 states away for his conference. That's when I realised Patricia must have used her spare key to get in. I called Patricia to ask if she'd been at our house. She cheerfully confirmed that she'd spent the afternoon making some improvements while I was at work. She said the living room flow was all wrong and that our kitchen organisation was inefficient. She seemed proud of herself for being helpful. I explained that I wasn't comfortable with her entering our home without permission and rearranging our belongings. Patricia got defensive and said she was only trying to help since I'd been working so much. She claimed the house needed attention and that she knew I'd appreciate coming home to a nicely organised space. When I told her I'd prefer she ask before coming over, she said I was being ungrateful. She pointed out that she'd brought her own cleaning supplies and flowers and hadn't asked us to reimburse her for anything. She said most daughters-in-law would be thrilled to have help with housework. I tried to explain that it wasn't about the help itself, but about boundaries and consent. Patricia said I was being dramatic and that family doesn't need permission to care for each other. She mentioned that David had never had a problem with her helping out before we got married. When David got back from his trip, I explained what had happened. He agreed that his mother should have asked first, but said she probably meant well. He suggested we just talk to her about boundaries rather than making it a big issue. He seemed more concerned about keeping the peace than addressing the violation of our privacy. The next week, Patricia let herself in again while I was at work. This time she'd rearranged our bedroom and bathroom. She'd moved our dresser, reorganised our closet, and even changed out our bedding for something she thought looked better. She'd also deep cleaned our bathroom and rearranged all our toiletries. I was furious and felt completely violated. Our bedroom is our most private space, and she'd gone through our personal belongings without any discussion. When I confronted her, she said she was helping us prepare for when we have children and need a more organised home. That weekend I went to the hardware store and had the locks changed. I didn't give Patricia a new key and told David that if his mother needed access to our house, in a real emergency, she could call us first. David was upset and said I was overreacting and creating family drama. Patricia found out about the locks when she tried to let herself in the following Tuesday. She called David crying and saying I was shutting her out of our lives. She accused me of being controlling and trying to damage her relationship with her son. David is now caught in the middle and says I should have discussed changing the locks with him first. He thinks I was too harsh and that we could have resolved this with better communication. His father called to say I was being disrespectful to their family and that Patricia was just trying to be helpful. But I feel like Patricia crossed major boundaries by entering our home without permission and going through our private spaces. The fact that she did it twice after I'd already expressed discomfort makes it clear she didn't respect our rules about the spare key. Am I the bad person for changing the locks to keep my mother-in-law from rearranging my house without permission? Oh, absolutely not. This woman is completely out of line and honestly kind of scary. Going through someone's bedroom and personal belongings is such a massive violation of privacy and boundaries. The fact that she did it again after being told not to shows she has zero respect for their autonomy as adults. The husband needs to grow a spine and support his wife instead of prioritizing his mother's feelings over his marriage. Let's dive into our final story for today, and this one is definitely going to leave you with some thoughts. Am I the bad person for telling my pregnant co-worker that her baby shower registry is unreasonable? I work at a small marketing firm with about 15 employees. We're all pretty close-knit and usually do group celebrations for birthdays, work anniversaries, and major life events. My co-worker Lisa is 7 months pregnant with her first baby and has been talking about her upcoming baby shower for weeks. Lisa created a registry and sent it around the office asking if people wanted to contribute to group gifts. I was excited to help celebrate her pregnancy since she's been trying to conceive for a while, and this baby is very much wanted. When I looked at the registry, I was honestly shocked by the prices. Almost everything on the list was high-end designer baby gear. There was a stroller that cost $800, a crib that was over $1,000, and even basic items like bottles and blankets were premium brands that cost 3 or 4 times what regular versions cost. The cheapest item on the entire registry was a set of burp cloths that cost $60. Most of the clothing items were designer baby outfits that cost more than what I spend on my own clothes. The car seat she wanted was nearly $500 when perfectly safe options exist for half that price. I work in an entry-level position and don't make a lot of money. Most of my co-workers are in similar situations since our company doesn't pay particularly well. I was hoping to contribute maybe $30 or $40 to a group gift, but realised that wouldn't even cover the tax on most of the items Lisa had selected. I mentioned the registry prices to a few other co-workers privately and found out I wasn't the only one concerned. Several people said they felt pressured to spend more than they could afford because Lisa had made comments about expecting the office to really celebrate her first pregnancy. Lisa had been talking about how excited she was to see what everyone would get her, and mentioning specific expensive items she hoped people would choose. She seemed to assume that our small office would be able to fund her entire high-end baby setup. One of my co-workers suggested we pool money for one big gift, but even splitting an $800 stroller 15 ways would be over $50 per person. That might not sound like a lot, but for someone making $30,000 a year, it's a significant expense for a co-worker gift. I decided to talk to Lisa privately about the registry situation. I approached it carefully and explained that some people were having trouble finding items in their budget range. I suggested she might want to add some lower-priced options so everyone could participate in celebrating her pregnancy. Lisa got defensive immediately and said she'd researched everything carefully and only wanted the safest, highest quality items for her baby. She said she didn't understand why people would want to give cheap gifts for something as important as a new baby. I tried to explain that it wasn't about wanting to give cheap gifts, but about people having different budget constraints. I mentioned that many of us are early in our careers and have student loans and other financial obligations that limit our discretionary spending. Lisa said if people couldn't afford to properly celebrate her pregnancy, they didn't have to participate at all. She seemed offended by the suggestion that her registry was unreasonable and said she'd rather get nothing than receive inferior baby products. The conversation got uncomfortable when Lisa accused me of being jealous that I wasn't having a baby and said some people just don't understand how expensive children are. She said once I had kids, I'd realise why she wanted the best of everything. Word got around the office about our conversation, and people started taking sides. Some co-workers agreed that the registry was unreasonably expensive and appreciated that I'd spoken up. Others thought I was being judgmental about Lisa's parenting choices and financial priorities. Lisa ended up creating a second registry with less expensive options, but she seemed resentful about it. She made comments about having to lower her standards because some people couldn't stretch their budgets for a special occasion. The baby shower ended up being awkward because the tension was obvious. Lisa seemed disappointed with some of the gifts and made comments about hoping to upgrade certain items later. Several co-workers felt uncomfortable and said they probably wouldn't participate in office celebrations anymore. Now Lisa barely speaks to me, and the office dynamic has been weird for weeks. Some people think I should have just quietly opted out instead of making it a bigger issue. Others say I did the right thing by addressing an uncomfortable situation that was affecting multiple people. Am I the bad person for telling my pregnant co-worker that her baby shower registry was too expensive for our office budget? This is such a tricky workplace situation because nobody wants to be the person complaining about a baby shower, but those prices are absolutely ridiculous for co-worker gifts. Expecting people making entry-level salaries to spend $50+ on baby gear crosses a major line. Lisa's attitude about wanting the best of everything is understandable, but demanding that from co-workers who aren't even close friends is pretty entitled. The fact that she got resentful about adding cheaper options shows this was never really about celebrating together. These next few stories are going to test your faith in humanity and maybe make you question some of your own life choices. Let's keep this chaos train rolling. Am I the bad person for refusing to pay for my brother's wedding after he uninvited me for being gay? I'm 26 and my brother Tyler is 29. We've always been close despite our 5-year age gap. When I came out to my family 3 years ago, Tyler was one of the most supportive people in my life. He immediately accepted my boyfriend Chris and even asked him to be in his wedding party when he got engaged last year. Tyler's fiancée Rebecca comes from a very conservative religious family. I knew they had some traditional views, but Tyler always assured me that wouldn't be a problem. He said Rebecca loved me and that her family would come around once they got to know me better. About 6 months ago, Tyler asked if I could help financially with the wedding. He and Rebecca were planning this huge celebration with over 200 guests, and the costs were getting out of control. Tyler works as a teacher, and Rebecca is still in graduate school, so they don't have a lot of disposable income. I'm a software engineer and make decent money, so I offered to cover the photography and videography, which came to about $8,000. Tyler was incredibly grateful and said it meant the world to him that I wanted to invest in his special day. I was happy to help because family's important to me. Last month, Tyler called me sounding really stressed. He said Rebecca's parents had threatened to boycott the wedding if Chris and I attended as a couple. Apparently, they found out we'd be staying in the same hotel room and sitting together at the reception, and they were horrified. Tyler said he was trying to find a compromise. He asked if Chris and I would be willing to attend as friends rather than as a couple. He suggested we could sit at different tables and avoid any public displays of affection to keep Rebecca's family comfortable. I was hurt, but I understood that weddings are complicated and involve multiple families. I agreed to tone down any couple behaviour if it meant I could still be there for Tyler's big day. I thought that would resolve the situation. 2 weeks later, Tyler called again. This time Rebecca's parents had escalated their demands. They said they wouldn't attend if I brought Chris at all. They also didn't want me in the wedding party anymore because having an openly gay groomsman would make them uncomfortable during the ceremony. Tyler sounded defeated when he told me. He said Rebecca was crying every day about the stress and that her parents were threatening to pull their financial contribution to the wedding if their conditions weren't met. He asked if I would consider attending alone and sitting in the back during the ceremony. I was getting really frustrated, but I still wanted to support Tyler. I agreed to come alone, even though it meant Chris couldn't be my +1 after we'd already booked our hotel and flights. I figured one day of discomfort was worth being there for my brother's wedding. Last week, Tyler called with what he said was the final request. Rebecca's parents had decided they couldn't handle having me at the wedding at all. They said my presence would be a distraction, and that they didn't want their extended family exposed to what they called my lifestyle choices. Tyler was practically in tears when he told me I was uninvited. He said he'd fought for me as much as he could, but that Rebecca's mental health was suffering from all the family drama. He promised we'd have a private celebration later, and that this didn't change how much he loved me. I was devastated and angry. I told Tyler that if I wasn't welcome at his wedding, then I wouldn't be contributing financially either. I explained that I wasn't going to fund a celebration that excluded me because of who I love. Tyler got defensive and said the money situation was separate from the guest list issues. He argued that I'd already committed to helping with the wedding costs, and that pulling out now would ruin everything they'd planned. He said Rebecca's family drama wasn't his fault. I told him that by choosing to exclude me, he was making Rebecca's family's homophobia his fault. I said I wouldn't pay for a wedding where I wasn't considered family enough to attend. I contacted the photography vendor and cancelled the contract. Tyler called me crying and said I was destroying his wedding out of spite. He accused me of caring more about making a point than about his happiness. He said I was being selfish and that the wedding would have to be drastically scaled back without my contribution. Rebecca got involved and sent me a long text about how I was punishing Tyler for her family's beliefs. She said she personally had no problem with me being gay, but that family harmony was more important than political statements. She begged me to reconsider for Tyler's sake. I stuck to my decision. The wedding is next month and Tyler has barely spoken to me since I pulled my financial support. My parents are divided, with my mum saying I should have been the bigger person and my dad supporting my choice to stand up for myself. Some extended family members have reached out saying I'm being vindictive and that weddings require compromise from everyone. Others have said they're proud of me for not tolerating discrimination, even from family. I feel terrible that Tyler's wedding plans are falling apart, but I also feel like I had to draw a line somewhere. If I funded a wedding that excluded me, I'd be sending the message that my family can treat me as less than equal, as long as they're polite about it. Tyler keeps texting, asking me to reconsider. He says he'll find a way to include me if I'll reinstate the photography funding. But I don't trust that he won't cave to Rebecca's family pressure again if they escalate their threats. Am I the bad person for refusing to pay for my brother's wedding after he uninvited me for being gay? This one hits different because it's family betraying family in the worst possible way. Tyler chose his fiancée's bigoted family over his own brother, and now he's shocked that actions have consequences. You don't get to exclude someone from your wedding because of who they love, and then still expect them to fund your party. The fact that he kept moving the goalposts from couple behaviour to +1 to completely uninvited shows he was never actually fighting for his brother. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's cowardice. Here's our next story, and honestly, this one made me question everything I thought I knew about workplace dynamics. Am I the bad person for reporting my co-worker to HR after she kept bringing her newborn to work? I work at a small consulting firm with about 20 employees. We have a pretty relaxed office culture, and most people are understanding about work-life balance issues. My co-worker Jennifer had her first baby about 2 months ago and took the standard 12-week maternity leave that our company offers. Jennifer came back to work last month, and everything seemed normal at first. She was adjusting to being a new mum and occasionally seemed tired, but that's completely understandable. I have kids myself, so I know how exhausting those first few months can be. About 3 weeks ago, Jennifer started bringing her baby daughter to the office occasionally. At first, it was just for an hour or two when her childcare fell through or she had pumping schedules to maintain. The baby was usually quiet and Jennifer kept her in her office most of the time. Nobody complained initially because we all understood that childcare can be unreliable and new parents need flexibility. Jennifer seemed grateful that the office was accommodating, and she always apologized if the baby made any noise during meetings or phone calls. But over the past 2 weeks, the baby has been at the office almost every day. Jennifer brings her in a car seat and sets up what's basically a mini nursery in her office, with bottles, diapers, toys, and a portable changing pad. The baby is here from 9 to 5 most days. The situation started affecting everyone's work environment. The baby cries frequently throughout the day, and Jennifer has to step out of meetings to handle feeding or diaper changes. During conference calls with clients, we've had to mute our audio when the baby starts fussing in the background. Last week, during an important presentation to a potential new client, the baby had a complete meltdown. Jennifer had to leave the room to calm her down, while the rest of us tried to continue the meeting. The client looked confused and uncomfortable about the whole situation. I've also noticed that Jennifer's productivity has dropped significantly. She's missing deadlines, and her work quality isn't what it used to be. It's obvious that she's trying to do 2 full-time jobs simultaneously, and neither one is getting the attention it needs. The breaking point came yesterday, when Jennifer asked me to watch the baby while she went to a client meeting across town. She said it would just be for 2 hours, and that the baby would probably sleep the whole time. I explained that babysitting wasn't part of my job responsibilities. Jennifer got frustrated and said she thought we were all supportive of working parents. She pointed out that I'd mentioned having kids and assumed I'd understand her situation. She said the baby wouldn't be any trouble and that she'd owe me a huge favour. I felt bad for Jennifer because I could see how stressed she was, but I also knew that watching her baby during work hours wasn't appropriate. I have my own deadlines and responsibilities that I can't neglect to provide free childcare for a co-worker. When Jennifer realised I wouldn't help, she asked several other co-workers. Most people made excuses about being too busy, but I could tell everyone was getting uncomfortable with the constant requests for baby-related assistance. That afternoon, I decided to speak with our office manager about the situation. I explained that while I sympathised with Jennifer's childcare challenges, the baby's presence was becoming disruptive to the work environment and affecting our ability to serve clients professionally. The office manager thanked me for bringing it to her attention and said she'd been getting complaints from other employees too. Apparently, Jennifer had asked multiple people to help with baby care duties, and several clients had commented on hearing crying during phone conferences. The next day, Jennifer was called into a meeting with HR and management. They explained that while the company wanted to support working parents, there needed to be boundaries around bringing children to the workplace. They gave her 2 weeks to arrange alternative childcare. Jennifer was upset and accused management of being unsupportive of new mothers. She said she thought our company culture was family-friendly and that she was disappointed by the lack of flexibility. She mentioned that several co-workers had seemed fine with the baby being there. When Jennifer found out I was the one who reported the situation, she confronted me angrily. She said I'd betrayed her trust and made her life as a new mother even more difficult. She accused me of being jealous, that I wasn't getting the same accommodations when my kids were babies. Jennifer said she might have to quit if she couldn't find affordable childcare in 2 weeks. She claimed I was potentially destroying her career over something that wasn't hurting anyone. She said the baby was quiet most of the time and that I was exaggerating the disruption. Other co-workers are divided on the situation. Some people think I should have talked to Jennifer directly before involving HR. Others are relieved that someone finally addressed what was becoming an increasingly awkward workplace issue. I feel terrible that Jennifer is struggling with childcare, but I also think there have to be professional boundaries. Our office isn't equipped to be a daycare, and it wasn't fair to expect co-workers to help with baby care during work hours. Jennifer has 2 more days to figure out her childcare situation. She's been cold toward me, and several people have mentioned that the office atmosphere has been tense since the HR meeting. I'm wondering if I should have handled this differently. Am I the bad person for reporting my co-worker to HR after she kept bringing her newborn to work every day? Look, I have so much sympathy for working parents trying to balance everything, but turning your office into a daycare isn't the solution. The fact that she was asking co-workers to babysit during work hours crosses every professional boundary that exists. Jennifer was putting everyone in an impossible position where they either had to provide free childcare or look like they don't support working mothers. Sometimes being supportive means having honest conversations about what's actually sustainable, and bringing a baby to work every single day clearly wasn't working for anyone involved. Let's move on to something that honestly made me rethink how well we really know the people closest to us. Am I the bad person for telling my best friend's husband that she's been lying about having cancer? This is probably the hardest situation I've ever been in, and I'm still not sure I made the right choice. My best friend Amanda and I have been close since college. We're both 34 now and have supported each other through everything from bad breakups to career changes to family drama. About 8 months ago, Amanda told me she'd been diagnosed with breast cancer. I was devastated for her and immediately offered to help however I could. She said she was starting chemotherapy and that the prognosis was good if they caught it early enough. Amanda seemed to handle the news really well initially. She researched treatment options, started eating healthier, and talked about fighting this thing with everything she had. Her husband Michael was incredibly supportive and took on extra household responsibilities to help her focus on recovery. Over the next few months, Amanda kept me updated on her treatment progress. She said the chemo was making her tired and nauseous, but that her doctors were optimistic about shrinking the tumour before surgery. She started wearing scarves and hats, saying her hair was thinning from the medication. I offered to go with Amanda to appointments, but she always said Michael was taking her, and that she didn't want to burden multiple people with her medical stuff. She seemed grateful for my emotional support, but preferred to keep the practical aspects of treatment between her and her husband. Around month 4, Amanda said she was having complications that required more aggressive treatment. She started missing work frequently and seemed more withdrawn when we talked. Michael mentioned that the medical bills were piling up and that they were stressed about finances. I organised a fundraiser through our friend group to help with Amanda's medical expenses. We raised about $6,000 through an online campaign and various events. Amanda was emotional when we presented the money and said she felt so supported by everyone's generosity. But I started noticing some inconsistencies in Amanda's story. She never lost her hair despite claiming to be on chemotherapy for months. When I asked about it, she said she was using cold caps during treatment to preserve her hair follicles, which seemed plausible. Amanda also never seemed to have the severe side effects that most chemo patients experience. She was tired sometimes, but I never saw her actually sick or nauseous. When I brought friends to visit during her supposed treatment days, she always looked perfectly healthy. I started paying closer attention to Amanda's social media and noticed she was posting photos from restaurants and social events during times when she claimed to be recovering from chemo sessions. The timeline didn't match what she was telling me about her treatment schedule. 3 months ago, I decided to do some investigating because something felt really wrong. I knew which oncology practice Amanda claimed to be using, so I called pretending to be confirming an appointment. They had no patient by her name in their system. I tried 2 other cancer centres in our area and got the same response. Either Amanda was using a fake name for treatment, or she wasn't actually receiving cancer care anywhere. I was hoping there was some explanation I wasn't seeing. The final red flag came when Amanda posted photos from a weekend trip to wine country. She looked completely healthy and was drinking alcohol, which seemed inconsistent with ongoing chemotherapy treatment. When I asked about the trip, she said her doctors encouraged light activities between treatment cycles. I couldn't ignore my suspicions anymore, so I decided to confront Amanda directly. I asked her to show me some documentation from her medical team or let me accompany her to an appointment. She got defensive and said I was violating her privacy. Amanda accused me of not trusting her and said she was hurt that I would question her cancer diagnosis. She said dealing with my suspicions was adding stress during an already difficult time. She refused to provide any proof of her medical treatment. I felt terrible for doubting my best friend, but too many things weren't adding up. I made the difficult decision to tell Michael about my concerns. I showed him the evidence I'd gathered, including the fact that none of the local cancer centres had Amanda as a patient. Michael was initially angry with me for suggesting Amanda was lying about something so serious, but when he started asking Amanda direct questions about her treatment, she couldn't provide satisfactory answers. He demanded to see medical records or speak with her doctors. After several days of pressure, Amanda finally admitted she'd been lying about having cancer. She said she'd made up the diagnosis because she was feeling neglected in her marriage and wanted attention and sympathy from friends and family. Michael was devastated and felt completely betrayed. He'd been taking care of Amanda for months, handling extra responsibilities and worrying constantly about losing his wife. He moved out of their house the next day and filed for divorce within a week. Amanda is now saying I destroyed her marriage by interfering in something that wasn't my business. She claims she was planning to gradually recover from the fake cancer and that my investigation ruined everything. She says I should have talked to her privately instead of involving Michael. The fallout has been intense. Our entire friend group is divided between people who are horrified by Amanda's deception and others who think I betrayed her trust by investigating her medical claims. Several friendships have been permanently damaged. We had to return the fundraiser money to everyone who contributed, which was embarrassing and complicated. Some people are demanding explanations about why they were misled into donating money for fake medical expenses. Amanda has been reaching out trying to explain that she was having a mental health crisis and that lying about cancer was a cry for help. She says she never meant for things to go so far and that she's seeking therapy to understand why she did this. I feel guilty about the role I played in destroying Amanda's marriage, but I also think Michael deserved to know the truth. He was making major life decisions based on false information about his wife's health and their financial situation. Am I the bad person for telling my best friend's husband that she was lying about having cancer? This is absolutely devastating and honestly one of the most manipulative things I've ever heard. Faking cancer for attention and sympathy is beyond cruel, especially when people are giving you money and emotional support based on lies. Michael deserved to know he was being deceived about something this massive in his marriage. The fact that she's now trying to frame this as a mental health crisis doesn't excuse months of calculated deception that affected multiple people's lives. Sometimes friendship means protecting people from the person who's supposed to love them most. We've got one more story to round out today's collection, and this one is going to leave you with some serious questions about family loyalty. Am I the bad person for not giving my inheritance to my siblings after our parents died in an accident? My parents died in a car accident 6 months ago. It was sudden and devastating, and our family is still processing the grief. My 2 older siblings and I are now dealing with settling their estate, which has created some unexpected family drama. I'm 28 and the youngest of 3 kids. My sister Rachel is 33 and my brother David is 35. We've always had different relationships with our parents and different life circumstances, but I never expected that to become relevant to inheritance discussions. When the will was read, we discovered that our parents had left everything to me: the house, their savings, investment accounts, and personal belongings were all designated to go to their youngest child. My siblings were mentioned in the will, but weren't left any significant assets. Rachel and David were shocked and hurt by the terms of the will. They couldn't understand why our parents would exclude them from inheriting anything substantial. The total value of the estate is around $400,000, which would have been life-changing money for all of us. I was surprised by the will too, because our parents had never discussed their estate planning with any of us. I had no idea they were planning to leave everything to me specifically. The lawyer explained that they'd updated their will about 2 years ago, but hadn't shared those changes with the family. My siblings immediately assumed there must have been some mistake, or that I had somehow influenced our parents' decision. Rachel accused me of manipulating them during their final years to secure a larger inheritance. David suggested we should ignore the will and split everything equally. I tried to understand why our parents made this choice, and the only explanation I could think of related to our different financial situations and life choices. Rachel and David both have stable careers, own homes, and have been financially independent for years. I've struggled more than my siblings professionally and financially. I went back to school in my mid-20s, which put me behind in my career. I've been living paycheck to paycheck and haven't been able to save much money or buy property. Our parents knew about my financial struggles and had helped me out occasionally with rent or car repairs. They'd mentioned wanting to make sure I was taken care of, but I never imagined they meant through their will. Rachel and David pointed out that they'd also received help from our parents over the years. David got assistance with his house down payment, and Rachel had her wedding partially funded by our parents. They argued that everyone had been supported equally during our parents' lifetime. The family tension escalated when my siblings demanded I redistribute the inheritance to make things fair. Rachel said keeping everything for myself would be selfish and would destroy our family relationships. David threatened to contest the will if I didn't agree to share. I felt torn because I understood my siblings' hurt and disappointment. At the same time, our parents had made a deliberate choice about their estate, and I felt obligated to respect their wishes. They could have split things equally if that's what they wanted. The practical reality is that this inheritance could completely change my life trajectory. I could pay off my student loans, buy a house, and finally have some financial security. For my siblings, this money would be nice, but wouldn't fundamentally alter their already stable situations. I decided to keep the inheritance as our parents intended, but I offered to give Rachel and David some personal items and family heirlooms that had sentimental value. I thought this was a reasonable compromise that honoured our parents' will, while acknowledging my siblings' emotional connection to family belongings. Rachel and David rejected my offer and said they wanted their fair share of the financial assets. Rachel accused me of being greedy and said I was choosing money over family relationships. David said he was disappointed in who I'd become and that our parents would be ashamed of my selfishness. The conflict has torn our family apart during what should be a time of grieving together. Rachel and David have stopped speaking to me and have told extended family that I'm refusing to share our parents' estate. Some relatives have taken sides and family gatherings have become uncomfortable. I've been second-guessing my decision because losing my siblings' relationships feels like losing even more family after our parents' death, but I also think our parents put thought into their estate planning and had reasons for structuring things the way they did. My siblings have consulted with a lawyer about contesting the will, but apparently it's legally sound and clearly expresses our parents' intentions. They're now pressuring me through other family members to reconsider my position. Some people tell me I should honour our parents' wishes since they knew all of us and made an informed decision about their estate. Others say family harmony is more important than legal documents and that I should prioritise maintaining relationships with my siblings. I'm struggling with guilt about benefiting from my parents' death while my siblings feel excluded, but I'm also frustrated that they're trying to pressure me into ignoring our parents' explicit wishes about their own assets? Am I the bad person for keeping my inheritance instead of splitting it equally with my siblings? This is such a painful situation because everyone's grief is getting tangled up with money and fairness and family dynamics. Your parents made a conscious choice about their estate planning, and they had access to all the information about everyone's circumstances when they made that decision. The fact that your siblings want to override your parents' explicit wishes because they don't like the outcome feels really problematic. Sometimes the people we love make choices we don't understand, but that doesn't mean we get to undo them after they're gone. Your parents clearly thought you needed this financial security more than your siblings did, and honestly, they were probably right. Here's the next story. In the batch, am I the bad person for refusing to pay for my brother's wedding after he uninvited me? I'm 31, and my brother Tyler is 28. We've always had a complicated relationship, but I thought we were in a good place until last month. Tyler has been engaged to his fiancée Jessica for about 2 years, and I've been helping them financially with wedding planning. Not because they asked, but because I genuinely wanted to support them. I've contributed around $8,000 so far, covering the venue deposit part of the catering, and even Jessica's dress alterations. The problem started when Tyler announced he was making his best friend from college his best man instead of me. I was honestly hurt because we'd talked about it before, and he said I would be his best man, but I tried to be understanding. Maybe they had a deeper friendship than I realised. I congratulated his friend and said I was still excited to be part of the wedding party. Then Jessica pulled me aside at a family barbecue and told me they were concerned about my behaviour at social events. She said I tend to drink too much and get loud, and they didn't want any drama on their special day. I was confused because, yes, I enjoy a few beers at parties, but I've never caused a scene or done anything embarrassing. I asked for specific examples and she couldn't give me any, just vague mentions of me being inappropriate. I told them I understood their concerns and would be happy to stay sober during the wedding if that would help. Jessica seemed satisfied with this compromise, and Tyler nodded along. But then 2 weeks later, I got a text from Tyler saying they had decided it would be best if I didn't attend the wedding at all. He said they wanted to keep things small and drama-free, and they thought my presence might make some guests uncomfortable. I was devastated. I called him immediately, asking what I had done wrong, and he just kept repeating that they wanted a peaceful celebration. He wouldn't give me specifics, just said some family members had expressed concerns about my behaviour at previous gatherings. When I pressed him about which family members, he got defensive and said it didn't matter. Here's where I might be the bad person. I told Tyler that if I wasn't welcome at his wedding, then I wanted my money back, all $8,000 of it. I explained that I had contributed that money as his brother, expecting to celebrate with him, and if he was cutting me out of his life, then I shouldn't be funding his party. Tyler exploded, saying I was being petty and manipulative. He said the money was a gift, and gifts don't come with conditions. I disagreed. I told him the money was given under the assumption that I would be part of his wedding and his life going forward, since he was essentially ending our relationship. I wanted my contribution returned. Tyler said I was trying to ruin his wedding, and that $8,000 was a huge amount to come up with on short notice. Jessica called me crying, saying I was destroying their dream wedding and that they had already spent the money. I felt terrible hearing her upset, but I also felt like they had used me. They took my money, my time, and my emotional investment, and then discarded me when it was convenient. Our parents are split. Mum thinks Tyler was wrong to uninvite me, but that I shouldn't have demanded the money back. Dad thinks I'm being vindictive and should just let it go for the sake of family peace. Our extended family is choosing sides, and it's creating a huge rift. Tyler sent me a long text yesterday saying he never wanted to hurt me, but that Jessica's family had concerns about my political views and drinking habits, and they threatened not to come if I was there. He said he chose his future wife's comfort over his brother, and he hopes I can understand that he also said demanding the money back proved that I never really cared about his happiness. Just about being included, I'm torn because I do love my brother, and I want him to be happy, but I also feel completely betrayed and used. The money isn't even really about the money anymore. It's about the principle. They made me feel like I wasn't good enough for their special day after I helped make it possible. So am I the bad person for demanding my money back after being uninvited to my brother's wedding? That's absolutely brutal, getting financially ghosted by your own brother after bankrolling his entire wedding. Honestly, Tyler sounds like he got manipulated by his fiancée and her family into cutting out his own blood. The fact that he couldn't give you specific examples of your supposed bad behaviour is telling. It sounds like they wanted your wallet but not your presence, which is just cold. The money demand might seem petty, but you were essentially an investor who got scammed. I'd want my $8,000 back too. Let's move on to another family disaster that'll make you grateful for your own relatives. Am I the bad person for telling my sister she's not welcome in my home until she apologises to my wife? My sister Chloe is 26 and has always been what my family calls spirited, but what I call completely inappropriate. She has no filter and thinks being brutally honest is a personality trait. My wife Rachel and I have been married for 3 years, and Chloe has never really warmed up to her. I thought it was just typical sister-in-law awkwardness, but it's gotten progressively worse. The incident that broke the camel's back happened at my birthday dinner. Last weekend, Rachel had spent all day cooking my favourite meal and decorating our house. She even made a homemade cake from scratch. It was really thoughtful and sweet. Chloe arrived an hour late without calling and immediately started complaining about the food. She said the chicken was dry, the vegetables were overcooked, and the cake looked like something a child would make. Rachel's face just fell. She's actually an amazing cook and had put so much effort into making the evening special. I could see her trying not to cry, but Chloe wasn't done. She then started telling Rachel that her outfit was unflattering and that she should consider a different hairstyle because the current one aged her. Rachel is 29 and absolutely beautiful, but she's always been insecure about her appearance. Chloe knows this because I've mentioned it before when asking family to be sensitive. The final straw was when Chloe announced that she thought Rachel was boring and couldn't understand what I saw in her. She said Rachel never had anything interesting to say and that our marriage seemed like I had settled for convenience rather than love. She said all of this in front of our parents and Rachel's sister, who had also come for dinner. Rachel excused herself and went to the bathroom. I could hear her crying. I followed her and found her having a panic attack. She was hyperventilating and couldn't catch her breath. It took 20 minutes to calm her down. When we came back out, Chloe was eating cake and laughing with our parents, like nothing had happened. I told everyone the party was over and asked them to leave. Chloe seemed genuinely surprised and asked what was wrong. I explained that her behaviour toward my wife was completely unacceptable and that she owed Rachel an apology. Chloe rolled her eyes and said she was just being honest and that Rachel needed to toughen up. I told Chloe she was no longer welcome in our home until she apologised sincerely to Rachel. She laughed and said I was being dramatic and that Rachel was manipulating me into choosing sides. I said there were no sides to choose. I was choosing my wife because that's what married people do. My parents stayed quiet during this exchange, but later my mum called to say I was being too harsh. She said, Chloe doesn't mean to be hurtful, and that's just how she is. She suggested Rachel should learn to ignore Chloe's comments and not take them personally. My dad agreed, saying family should stick together and that banning Chloe was extreme. Chloe has been texting me daily, saying I'm ruining our family over someone who isn't even blood related. She says Rachel has turned me against my own sister, and that I used to have a sense of humour about these things. She's also been posting vague things on social media about fake people and toxic relationships. Rachel feels terrible about the whole situation. She keeps apologizing for causing drama and says maybe she should just deal with Chloe's behavior to keep peace in my family. I told her absolutely not. Nobody gets to treat my wife like garbage in our own home, family or not. Some of our mutual friends think I'm overreacting. They say Chloe has always been blunt and that Rachel should have expected it. They think banning her from our house is too extreme and that I should just talk to Chloe about toning it down. But I've tried talking to her before and she just doesn't listen. Yesterday, Chloe showed up at our house unannounced, expecting to be let in for Sunday dinner. Like nothing happened when I told her through the door that my position hadn't changed. She started yelling about how Rachel had poisoned me against my family. She said some really nasty things about my wife that I won't repeat. Rachel heard everything and had another panic attack. I had to call her sister to come over and help while I dealt with Chloe. I ended up calling the police to have her removed from our property because she wouldn't leave. She kept screaming that I was choosing an outsider over blood. Now my whole family's furious with me. They say I've gone too far and that calling the cops on my own sister was unforgivable. My mum is barely speaking to me, and my dad says I need to fix this before I lose my family forever. They want me to apologise to Chloe and lift the ban. I feel like I'm going crazy. Everyone is acting like Rachel deserved to be treated badly and that I'm wrong for protecting my wife. Am I the bad person for banning my sister from my home until she apologises? Honestly, this one makes my blood boil. Your sister isn't brutally honest. She's just brutal. There's a massive difference between being direct and being cruel. Rachel didn't deserve any of that treatment. And the fact that your family's enabling Chloe's toxic behaviour is disturbing you did exactly what a good husband should do. Protect your wife. The people saying you chose an outsider over blood are missing the point. Rachel became your family the day you married her. Good for you for having her back. Here's another story that shows how money can absolutely destroy relationships. Am I the bad person for not giving my inheritance to my step-siblings? My dad passed away 6 months ago and left me his entire estate worth about $400,000. This includes his house, his savings, and his small business. He had been married to my stepmother Linda for 8 years, and she has 2 kids from her previous marriage. Kevin, who's 25, and Ashley, who's 23. I'm 30, and I was my dad's only biological child. My mum died when I was 12, so it was just me and Dad for a long time. Before he met Linda, I had a good relationship with Linda, and her kids. We weren't super close, but we got along fine and felt like a blended family. The will reading was awkward. Linda was clearly expecting to inherit something substantial, and when the lawyer read that everything went to me, you could see the shock on her face. Kevin and Ashley looked devastated. Linda asked if there had been some mistake, and the lawyer confirmed that the will was recent and very clear. After the reading, Linda pulled me aside and explained that she had been counting on some inheritance to help Kevin and Ashley get established in life. Kevin just graduated from college with student loans, and Ashley is still in school. She said my dad had always talked about wanting to help all his kids succeed, and she assumed that meant he would provide for everyone. I felt terrible seeing how upset everyone was, but I also knew my dad had his reasons for the will. He had always been very clear with me about building wealth and leaving a legacy. He used to say that everything he worked for was so I could have a better life than he did. Linda asked if I would consider sharing the inheritance with Kevin and Ashley. She suggested splitting it 3 ways. Since we were all his kids in his eyes, she said it would be what he would have wanted, even if he didn't put it in writing. I told her I needed time to think about it. Over the next few weeks, the pressure intensified. Linda would bring up the inheritance, constantly talking about how unfair it was, that I got everything just because I was blood-related, she said. Kevin and Ashley had considered him their real father and that he had loved them like his own children. Kevin started avoiding me completely, and Ashley would make passive-aggressive comments about how some people get everything handed to them while others have to struggle. Linda began sharing stories about how my dad had promised to help with college expenses and down payments for houses. I decided to talk to my dad's best friend, who had known him for 30 years. He told me something that changed everything. Apparently, my dad had been frustrated with Kevin and Ashley's lack of motivation and responsibility. He felt like they expected handouts without putting in effort. My dad had paid for Kevin's entire college education, including room and board, and Kevin had barely graduated with a 2.5 GPA. My dad had also given Ashley money for a car, which she immediately crashed while texting and driving, then expected him to buy her another one. He had been quietly complaining to his friend that Linda's kids took his generosity for granted and never showed appreciation. Armed with this information, I sat down with Linda and explained that I wouldn't be sharing the inheritance. She became furious and accused me of being greedy and selfish. She said I was dishonoring my father's memory by not taking care of his stepchildren. Kevin sent me a long angry text saying I was heartless and that he had always looked up to me as a big brother. He said I was destroying our family over money and that he couldn't believe I would leave them struggling when I could easily help. Ashley was more direct. She called me a selfish bitch and said she hoped I enjoyed being rich while her family suffered. Linda has been telling extended family and friends that I stole her children's inheritance. She's painting herself as a grieving widow who got screwed over by her greedy stepchild. Several family friends have reached out to say they're disappointed in me. The guilt is eating me alive. Part of me wonders if I should just give them something to preserve the relationships, but another part of me thinks my dad made his choice for good reasons. He could have changed his will at any time, but chose not to. Yesterday, Linda served me with legal papers claiming she's entitled to a portion of the estate as his surviving spouse. The lawyer says she doesn't have a case, but it's still stressful and expensive to deal with. I keep going back and forth between feeling justified and feeling like a terrible person. Kevin and Ashley grew up in our house for 8 years, and they did seem to love my dad. Maybe he would have wanted me to share if he had known how it would tear the family apart. Am I the bad person for keeping my entire inheritance instead of sharing with my step-siblings? This is such a tough situation, but honestly, your dad was a grown man who knew exactly what he was doing when he wrote that will. He could have included them if he wanted to. The fact that his best friend confirmed he was frustrated with their entitlement says everything you need to know. Linda trying to sue you after years of accepting your dad's generosity toward her kids is just proving his point about their character. You're not responsible for funding other people's lives, even if they lived in the same house. Let me just grab some more materials for this build while we dive into the next story. This one honestly left me speechless. Am I the bad person for exposing my best friend's affair at her baby shower? I've been best friends with Natalie for 12 years. We met in college and have been through everything together. Breakups, job losses, family drama, the works when she got pregnant last year. I was over the moon for her. She'd been trying for 2 years with her husband Mike and they were both so excited. Natalie asked me to be the godmother and help plan her baby shower. I was honoured and threw myself into making it perfect. I spent weeks coordinating with vendors, picking themes and organising games. I wanted everything to be special for her and the baby. About a month before the shower, I was at Natalie's house, helping her set up the nursery. While Mike was at work, she went to take a shower and left her phone on the dresser. It kept buzzing with notifications, and the screen was lighting up. I wasn't trying to snoop, but I couldn't help noticing the contact name that kept popping up: Derek with heart emojis. Derek is Mike's younger brother. He's 24, single, and has always been kind of flirty with everyone, including Natalie. I thought it was just his personality, but seeing his name with hearts made me uncomfortable. When Natalie came back, I casually mentioned that Derek had been texting. She immediately grabbed her phone and said it was probably just about shower planning since he was helping with setup. Something felt off about her reaction. She seemed nervous and kept checking her phone throughout the rest of our time. Together, I tried to brush it off, but my gut was telling me something was wrong. 2 weeks later, I was at Target picking up last-minute shower supplies when I saw them. Derek and Natalie sitting in his car in the parking lot. They were clearly in an intimate conversation, and as I watched Derek leaned over and kissed her, I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to process what I'd seen. My best friend was cheating on her husband with his own brother while pregnant with their child. I felt sick. I wanted to believe there was some explanation, but there was no mistaking what I'd witnessed. I didn't know what to do. I considered confronting Natalie directly, but I was afraid she'd just lie or make excuses. I thought about telling Mike, but that felt like overstepping. Plus, what if I was wrong? Somehow, I decided to wait and see if she would come clean on her own. The baby shower arrived and everything looked perfect. The venue was decorated beautifully. There were about 40 guests, including both sides of the family. Mike was beaming with pride, helping serve food and talking excitedly about becoming a dad. Derek was there too, acting completely normal, like nothing was happening. During the gift opening, Natalie was glowing and gracious, thanking everyone for their generosity. Mike kept kissing her cheek and rubbing her belly, talking about how lucky he was to have such an amazing wife. I felt like I was watching a horrible performance. Then came the moment that pushed me over the edge. Natalie's mother-in-law stood up to give a toast. She talked about how blessed their family was to be growing, and how Mike and Natalie were such a perfect example of true love and commitment. She said she couldn't wait to watch their child grow up, surrounded by so much love and family unity. As she spoke, I watched Derek shift uncomfortably in his seat while Natalie smiled and nodded along. Mike was tearing up at his mother's words, and I just couldn't take it anymore. This poor man was being deceived by the two people closest to him, while everyone celebrated what they thought was his happy family. I stood up and asked if I could say something. Everyone turned to look at me expectantly. I took a deep breath and said I had something important to share about Natalie's pregnancy journey. I pulled out my phone and showed the photos I'd taken of them kissing in the parking lot. The room went completely silent. You could hear a pin drop. Mike's face went white as he stared at the screen. Natalie started hyperventilating, and Derek bolted for the door. Several guests gasped and started whispering. Mike's mother dropped her champagne glass, and it shattered on the floor. Natalie started screaming that I was a jealous, bitter person who was trying to ruin her life. She claimed the photos were taken out of context, and that Derek was just comforting her about pregnancy stress. Mike didn't say anything. He just kept staring at the photos, then at his wife, then at the door where his brother had disappeared. The shower ended immediately. Guests started leaving awkwardly, whispering among themselves. Mike's family looked devastated, and Natalie's family seemed torn between defending her and processing the shock. I felt terrible for ruining what should have been a celebration, but I also felt like Mike deserved to know the truth. Mike filed for divorce the next week and demanded a paternity test when the baby was born. It turned out the child was Derek's, not Mike's Natalie, and Derek are now together trying to make it work while dealing with the fallout. From both families, most of our mutual friends have cut contact with both of them. Natalie has been harassing me through text and social media, calling me every name in the book, she says. I destroyed her family and ruined her child's future. She claims she was going to end things with Derek after the baby was born, and that I should have minded my own business. Some people think I did the right thing by exposing the truth, while others think I should have handled it privately. They say I humiliated Natalie and potentially traumatized the other guests by revealing such explosive information at a public event. Mike thanked me for telling him the truth, but he's obviously devastated. He said he suspected something was off, but never imagined it was his own brother. He's in therapy now, trying to work through the betrayal and figure out how to move forward. I keep second-guessing myself, wondering if there was a better way to handle the situation. Maybe I should have pulled Mike aside privately instead of making it a public spectacle. But I was so angry watching him be deceived, while everyone celebrated their fake happiness. Am I the bad person for exposing my best friend's affair at her baby shower? Geez, the brother-in-law Really, this whole situation is like a soap opera from hell. But honestly, Mike deserved to know before he spent the rest of his life raising another man's child. The public humiliation was brutal, but sometimes the truth has to come out messy. Natalie made her choices, and the consequences followed. She can't blame you for her own actions when she was living a complete lie. Speaking of family betrayals, here's one that shows how inheritance can bring out the absolute worst in people. Am I the bad person for selling my grandmother's house instead of letting my cousin live there? My grandmother passed away last year and left me her house in her will. It's a beautiful 3-bedroom home in a desirable neighborhood worth about $300,000. She raised me there after my parents died in a car accident. When I was 8, I lived with her until I graduated college and moved across the country for work. My cousin Jennifer is 35 with 3 kids and has been struggling financially for years. She's a single mum, working 2 jobs to make ends meet. When my grandmother got sick, Jennifer stepped up in a big way. She moved back to town to help care for her, spending weekends at the house cooking, cleaning, and providing companionship. After the funeral, Jennifer approached me about the house. She explained that she was facing eviction from her current apartment and asked if she could move into grandmother's house temporarily, just until she got back on her feet. She promised it would only be for a few months, while she saved up for a deposit on a new place. I felt terrible for her situation, but I'd already decided to sell the house. I live in California now and have my own mortgage and expenses. I can't afford to maintain a property across the country. Plus, the house needs significant repairs that would cost tens of thousands of dollars. I explained this to Jennifer and offered to let her stay for 3 months while I prepared the house for sale. She could live there rent-free during that time, which would give her a chance to save money and find alternative housing. She seemed grateful for the compromise and moved in with her kids. But 3 months turned into 6, then 9. Jennifer kept asking for extensions, claiming she needed more time to save money. She said the kids had settled into their schools and moving again would be traumatic for them. She also started treating the house like it was hers, redecorating rooms and making changes without asking permission. When I visited for the holidays, I was shocked at what I found. Jennifer had painted over my grandmother's hand, painted kitchen cabinets, and removed wallpaper that had been there for decades. She'd also gotten rid of furniture and decorations that had thus sentimental value, claiming she needed more space for her kids. I was upset, but tried to be understanding. She was going through a tough time and maybe didn't realize how much those things meant to me. I gently asked her to check with me before making major changes and reminded her that I still planned to sell the house. Jennifer's response floored me. She said she'd been talking to a lawyer and believed she had squatters' rights, since she'd been living there for 9 months. She claimed that my grandmother had always intended for the house to stay in the family and that selling it was betraying her memory. She said her kids called it home now and that forcing them to move would be cruel. She accused me of being greedy and caring more about money than family. She said I already had a house and didn't need another one, while she and her children were facing homelessness. I was stunned. I explained that squatters' rights don't work that way, especially when someone has permission to be there temporarily. But Jennifer had clearly gotten bad legal advice, or was just hoping to scare me into backing down. I gave her 30 days notice to vacate the property. She responded by refusing to leave and changing the locks. I had to hire a lawyer and go through the formal eviction process, which took months and cost thousands of dollars. Jennifer fought it every step of the way, claiming I was destroying her family. During the eviction proceedings, Jennifer launched a social media campaign against me. She posted photos of her kids crying and talked about how their heartless cousin was making them homeless. She shared memories of my grandmother and claimed I was dishonoring her legacy by choosing money over family. Our extended family got involved and opinions were split. Some relatives thought I was being cruel and should just let Jennifer have the house, since she needed it more than I did. Others supported my right to do what I wanted with my inheritance, but the drama was tearing everyone apart. The eviction finally went through, But Jennifer had trashed the house before leaving. She'd punched holes in walls, broken windows, and destroyed the hardwood floors. I had to spend an additional $40,000 on repairs before I could even think about selling. Jennifer is now living in a small apartment with her kids and struggling more than ever. She's told everyone who will listen that I'm responsible for her situation and that my grandmother would be ashamed of me. Some family members have cut contact with me entirely. The house finally sold last month for $260,000 after all the legal fees, repairs and carrying costs. I barely broke even on the whole ordeal. I used the money to pay off my own mortgage, which has improved my financial situation significantly. But the family relationships are permanently damaged. Jennifer won't speak to me, and several relatives treat me like I'm some kind of monster who kicked children out of their home. I sometimes wonder if I should have just signed the house over to her to avoid all this pain. Am I the bad person for selling my grandmother's house instead of letting my cousin live there? The audacity of changing the locks and claiming squatters' rights is absolutely unhinged. Jennifer took advantage of your grief and generosity, then tried to steal your inheritance. When that didn't work, she destroyed the property out of spite. Your grandmother left the house to you, not her, and you had every right to sell it. The fact that she turned your entire family against you while literally vandalizing your property shows exactly who she really is. You dodged a bullet by getting her out. When you did this, next one is absolutely wild. It involves wedding drama, cheating, and the most satisfying revenge I've ever heard. Am I the bad person for ruining my ex-fiance's wedding by telling his bride about his bachelor party? I was engaged to David for 2 years. We met in graduate school, and I thought he was the love of my life. He proposed during a weekend trip to Napa, and I said yes. Immediately, we started planning a wedding for the following summer. Everything seemed perfect, until it wasn't 3 months before our wedding. David's behavior started changing. He became distant and secretive, always on his phone and making excuses to stay out late. He said he was stressed about work and planning the wedding, but something felt off. I tried talking to him about it, but he insisted everything was fine. 2 weeks before the wedding, David went to Vegas for his bachelor party with his college friends. I wasn't worried about it. He'd never given me reason not to trust him, and I was busy with my own bachelorette party planning. But when he came back, he was different, even more distant and jumpy. A few days after he returned, I got a call from an unknown number. It was a woman named Crystal who said she needed to talk to me about David. She sounded nervous and kept apologizing, but said she felt I deserved to know the truth. Apparently, she was a dancer at the club where David's bachelor party had been held. Crystal told me that David hadn't just gotten a lap dance or watched the show. He had taken her back to his hotel room, and they'd spent the night together. She said she felt terrible when she found out he was getting married in 2 weeks. She'd seen my engagement photos on his social media and couldn't live with the guilt. I was devastated, but I needed proof. Crystal sent me photos of them together in his hotel room, including some very intimate shots that made it clear they'd been physical. She also had screenshots of text messages he'd sent her after Vegas, talking about how amazing their night had been and asking when they could meet up again. I confronted David with the evidence, and he completely broke down. He admitted to everything and begged me to forgive him. He said it was just cold feet and that it meant nothing. He promised it would never happen again and that he wanted to spend his life making it up to me. I told him the engagement was off and that I needed time to think about everything. He panicked and said we couldn't cancel the wedding with 2 weeks' notice, that we'd lose all the deposits and disappoint everyone. He actually suggested we go through with the ceremony and work on our relationship afterward. I moved out of our apartment and stayed with my sister while I processed everything. David called and texted, constantly begging me to reconsider. He said he'd been stupid and scared, but that he truly loved me and wanted to marry me. I was torn between my love for him and my sense of betrayal. Then I found out something that changed everything. David hadn't cancelled any of the wedding vendors. Instead, he'd been secretly dating someone else, a co-worker named Amanda, who I'd always suspected had feelings for him. Apparently they'd been seeing each other since right after Vegas. When I discovered this, I realised David wasn't actually sorry about cheating, he was just sorry he got caught. He'd moved on incredibly quickly and was planning to marry Amanda using all the arrangements I'd made for our wedding, the venue, the flowers, the photographer, everything. I'd spent months planning. I was furious, not just about the cheating, but about him using my wedding plans for another woman. I'd put my heart into every detail of that celebration, and he was just going to swap out the bride like I was interchangeable. It felt like the ultimate insult, so I decided to attend the wedding as a guest. I still had my invitation, and David was too much of a coward to uninvite me himself. I dressed nicely, but not too formally, and took a seat in the back. Amanda looked beautiful in what should have been my dress walking down, what should have been my aisle during the ceremony, when the officiant asked if anyone objected. I stood up, the entire room turned to look at me, including David, whose face went white. Amanda looked confused, and the officiant seemed unsure how to proceed. I pulled out my phone and started reading the text messages David had sent to Crystal after their night together, the ones where he talked about how incredible she was, and how he couldn't stop thinking about her. I read them word for word in front of everyone. Then I showed the photos Crystal had sent me, projecting them onto the big screen the venue had set up for their slideshow. The intimate shots of David with another woman. Just weeks before this wedding. Amanda started crying, and David tried to rush toward me, but his groomsmen held him back. The room erupted in chaos. Amanda's family was screaming. David's mother was crying, and guests were either staring in shock or trying to leave. I calmly walked out while everyone processed what they'd just learned. Amanda called off the wedding immediately and left David at the altar. His family was humiliated and had to explain to all the guests what had happened. Several people thanked me later for saving Amanda from making a huge mistake. David has been harassing me ever since, claiming I ruined his life out of jealousy and spite. He says what happened in Vegas was a mistake, but that I had no right to destroy his chance at happiness with Amanda. He's threatened to sue me for defamation and emotional distress. Some mutual friends think I went too far and should have just let him live with his choices. They say Amanda would have found out eventually, and that humiliating them publicly was cruel. Others think David got exactly what he deserved for being a cheating liar. Amanda reached out to thank me for telling her the truth. She said she had no idea about David's behaviour and was grateful to find out before legally binding herself to him. She's doing well and has started dating someone new who actually respects her. I don't regret what I did. David made his choices, and I simply made sure everyone knew who they were, really celebrating that day. If he wanted a drama-free wedding, he should have been faithful to his first fiancée. Am I the bad person for ruining my ex-fiancé's wedding by telling his bride about his bachelor party? Wow, you literally saved that woman from making the biggest mistake of her life. David thought he could just recycle your entire wedding for his side piece, and nobody would ever find out. The sheer disrespect of using your venue, your flowers, your everything for another woman after cheating on you is beyond comprehension. Amanda owes you a massive thank you card because you prevented her from legally binding herself to a serial cheater. The fact that he's threatening to sue you for exposing his own behaviour shows he still doesn't understand that actions have consequences. This is honestly the most satisfying revenge story I've ever heard. We dive into another absolute mess of a story that, honestly, had me questioning everything I thought I knew about family dynamics. Am I the bad person for refusing to attend my daughter's wedding because she chose her stepdad to walk her down the aisle? I'm 52 and my daughter Lily is 24. Her mother and I divorced when Lily was 8 after I found out about her affair with her co-worker James. The divorce was messy and bitter, and I'll admit I wasn't the best father during those early years after the split. I was angry, depressed, and probably drank too much while trying to process everything. Lily's mother married James when Lily was 10, and he became her stepfather. I have to give credit where it's due. James stepped up in ways I was failing to at the time. He went to her school plays, helped with homework, and was there for all the day-to-day parenting stuff while I was still figuring out how to be a weekend dad. By the time Lily was in high school, I had gotten my act together. I went to therapy, quit drinking, and really tried to rebuild our relationship. We started having regular dinners, I attended her soccer games, and I helped pay for her college tuition. I thought we had gotten to a good place over the past few years. When Lily got engaged to her boyfriend, Trevor, last year, I was thrilled. I've always liked Trevor, and I was excited to be part of their wedding planning. Lily asked me to contribute financially to the wedding, which I was happy to do. I've paid for about half of everything: the venue, catering, flowers, and her dress. It's been expensive, but she's my only child, and I wanted her to have the wedding of her dreams. Last month, during a family dinner, Lily casually mentioned that she had asked James to walk her down the aisle. She said it like it was the most natural thing in the world, like I should have expected it. I was completely blindsided. I sat there in stunned silence while she continued talking about wedding details, like nothing had happened. I asked her privately later why she had chosen James over me. She explained that James had been more present during her teenage years and that he felt like her real dad in many ways. She said she knew it might hurt my feelings, but that James had earned the right to walk her down the aisle through his consistent presence in her life. I told her I understood her reasoning, but that it was incredibly painful for me. I explained that I had worked hard to rebuild our relationship, and that walking her down the aisle was something I had dreamed about since she was born. I asked if there was any way we could both do it, or if she would reconsider. Lily said she had already asked James and didn't want to change it now. She said she hoped I could understand and still be happy for her on her wedding day. She reminded me that I would still have an important role as her father, and that one moment didn't define our entire relationship. I was devastated, but tried to accept her decision. However, over the next few weeks, the hurt just grew stronger. Every time I thought about watching another man walk my daughter down the aisle while I sat in the audience, I felt sick to my stomach. The fact that I was paying for half the wedding made it even more painful. I finally told Lily that I couldn't attend the wedding if James was walking her down the aisle. I explained that it wasn't about punishing her or being petty, but that it would be too emotionally devastating for me to witness. I said I would rather remember her as my little girl than watch another man have that special moment with her. Lily was upset and accused me of trying to manipulate her into changing her mind. She said I was being selfish and making her wedding about me instead of celebrating her happiness. She pointed out that I had missed so many important moments in her childhood due to my own issues, and now I was threatening to miss the most important day of her life. Her mother called me furious, saying I was emotionally blackmailing Lily and trying to ruin her wedding. She said James had been more of a father to Lily than I ever was, and that I should be grateful someone stepped up when I couldn't. She accused me of being jealous and vindictive. James actually reached out to me and suggested we could both walk her down the aisle together. He said he understood my feelings and didn't want to cause family drama, but Lily rejected this compromise, saying it would feel awkward and forced. She wants James to do it alone or not at all. My family's divided on this. My sister thinks I'm being dramatic and should just suck it up for Lily's sake. My brother supports my decision and says he would feel the same way in my position. Several friends have told me that skipping my own daughter's wedding is something I'll regret forever. The wedding is in 6 weeks, and Lily and I haven't spoken in 2 weeks. She stopped asking for my financial contributions, and I assume James is covering the rest. I keep going back and forth between standing my ground and just accepting the situation to preserve our relationship. Trevor called me yesterday, begging me to reconsider. He said Lily has been crying constantly and that the wedding planning has become stressful instead of joyful. He said he understands why I'm hurt, but that Lily needs her father there, regardless of who walks her down the aisle. Part of me knows I'm being stubborn and that I should put Lily's happiness first. But another part of me feels like if I don't stand up for myself now, I'll always be the secondary father figure in her life. I've already lost so many important moments due to my mistakes in the past, and losing this one feels like the final nail in the coffin. Am I the bad person for refusing to attend my daughter's wedding because she chose her stepdad to walk her down the aisle? This is heartbreaking on every level, because everyone's pain here is completely valid. You missed crucial years when she needed you most, and James filled that void. Now you're both paying for those lost years in the most brutal way possible. But missing her wedding won't change the past or prove your love. Sometimes swallowing your pride is the only way to show up for the people you love, even when it destroys you inside. Here's another story that shows how social media can absolutely obliterate relationships in the most unexpected ways. Am I the bad person for posting my ex-boyfriend's private messages after he spread lies about me? I dated Connor for 2 years, and we broke up about 6 months ago. It wasn't a horrible breakup initially. We just grew apart and wanted different things. He wanted to travel and be spontaneous while I was focused on my career and saving money. We agreed to stay friends and had a pretty amicable split. The problem started about 3 months after we broke up, when Connor started dating this girl, Becca, from his yoga class. I was actually happy for him at first because I wanted him to move on and be happy. I was casually seeing someone new myself, so there were no lingering romantic feelings. But Connor apparently wasn't as over our relationship as he claimed. According to mutual friends, he had been telling people that I was the reason our relationship failed. He said I was controlling, manipulative, and had trust issues that made it impossible for him to be himself around me. At first I ignored it because I figured people would form their own opinions and that engaging would just create more drama. But then the stories started getting more elaborate and damaging. Connor told people at his work that I had been emotionally abusive and that he was still recovering from the trauma of our relationship. The final straw came when my friend Jessica told me that Connor had been telling people I had cheated on him multiple times throughout our relationship. This was completely false. I had never even looked at another guy while we were together, but apparently he was using this story to explain why he had trust issues with Becca and needed space to heal. I was furious because these lies were starting to affect my reputation in our social circle. People were treating me differently, and I could tell they were judging me based on Connor's version of events. I confronted him over text, asking him to stop spreading false information about me. Connor denied saying anything bad about me and claimed people were misunderstanding or exaggerating his words. He said he had only shared his truth about our relationship and that if it made me look bad, maybe I should reflect on my behaviour. He accused me of being paranoid and trying to control what he said to his friends. I asked him to publicly correct the record about the cheating allegations since they were completely fabricated. Connor refused and said he didn't owe me anything since we weren't together anymore. He said I needed to move on and stop obsessing over what people thought about our past relationship. That's when I decided to fight fire with fire. I went through my phone and found screenshots of text conversations Connor and I had during our relationship. These messages showed a very different side of him than the victim narrative he was spinning to everyone. The texts revealed that Connor had actually been the jealous and controlling one in our relationship. There were messages where he demanded to know where I was and who I was with at all times. Screenshots of him accusing me of flirting with male co-workers and friends. Long rants about how I didn't prioritize him enough and spent too much time on my career. There were also messages where Connor admitted to going through my phone and social media accounts without permission. Texts where he criticized my appearance, my friends and my family. Messages showing his explosive temper when things didn't go his way, including threats to break up with me if I didn't change various aspects of my personality. I posted a carefully curated selection of these screenshots on Instagram with a caption explaining that I felt compelled to share the truth after months of false accusations. I said I hadn't wanted to air our private business, but that Connor's lies were damaging my reputation and relationships. The response was immediate and dramatic. Our mutual friends were shocked to see Connor's actual behaviour during our relationship. Many people commented that they had no idea he could be so controlling and manipulative. Several of my female friends shared their own stories about Connor making them uncomfortable at parties. Connor's current girlfriend Becca reached out to me privately, asking if there were more messages. Apparently she had been experiencing some of the same controlling behaviour from Connor, and my posts helped her realise it wasn't normal. She thanked me for opening her eyes and broke up with Connor a few days later. Connor was absolutely livid. He called me screaming about how I had violated his privacy and ruined his life. He said the messages were taken out of context and that I was a vindictive, crazy person who couldn't let him be happy. He threatened to sue me for harassment and defamation. His friends and family started attacking me online, saying I was bitter about the breakup and trying to destroy Connor's reputation out of jealousy. They claimed I had manipulated the screenshots or made them up entirely. Connor's mother sent me a long message, calling me evil and saying I was trying to ruin her son's life. Some of our mutual friends think I went too far by making our private conversations public. They say I should have handled it privately or just ignored Connor's lies. They argue that posting personal messages crossed a line and that two wrongs don't make a right. Others completely support what I did and say Connor got what he deserved for spreading lies about me. They think he needed to face consequences for his behaviour and that I had every right to defend myself with evidence. The whole situation has created a huge rift in our friend group, with people taking sides. Some gatherings have become awkward because half the group supports me and half thinks I'm vindictive. A few people have stopped talking to me entirely over this drama. I'm starting to wonder if I should have just let Connor's lies run their course instead of escalating things. Maybe people would have eventually seen through his stories without me having to expose our private conversations. But I also feel like I had to defend myself against false accusations that were damaging my reputation. Am I the bad person for posting my ex-boyfriend's private messages after he spread lies about me? Sometimes the truth needs receipts, and Connor learned that lesson the hard way. He spent months systematically destroying your reputation with lies, thinking you'd just take it quietly. The fact that his own girlfriend recognized the same patterns shows you probably saved her from years of manipulation. You gave him multiple chances to stop before you brought out the evidence. Let's move to another story about someone discovering just how little they actually meant to the people they thought cared about them. Am I the bad person for not helping my former best friend when her husband left her? Kelly and I were inseparable for 15 years, ever since we met in college. We were each other's maid of honour, godmothers to each other's kids, and talked almost every day. I considered her my sister and thought our friendship was unbreakable until I realised how one-sided it actually was. The wake-up call came 2 years ago when my husband lost his job unexpectedly. We went from comfortable middle-class living to struggling to pay our mortgage almost overnight. I was working part-time and suddenly became the sole breadwinner while my husband searched for new employment. During this crisis, I reached out to Kelly for emotional support. We had always been there for each other through difficult times, or so I thought. But Kelly's response to my situation was completely different than I expected. Instead of offering comfort or practical help, she seemed annoyed that I was bringing negativity into her life. Kelly started making comments about how I should have been more financially prepared and that my husband should take any job available instead of being picky. She said she didn't understand why I was so stressed because lots of people go through job loss. When I tried to explain how scared I was about losing our house, she changed the subject. I noticed that Kelly stopped inviting me to social events during this time. Later, I found out through social media that she had been hosting dinner parties and girls' nights that I wasn't included in. When I asked her about it, she said she thought I couldn't afford to participate and was trying to be considerate. The final straw came when I asked Kelly if I could borrow $300 to cover a car repair that I needed to get to work. I promised to pay her back within 2 months and reminded her of all the times I had helped her financially over the years. Kelly said she didn't feel comfortable mixing money and friendship and that I should ask family instead. This was particularly hurtful because I had lent Kelly money multiple times throughout our friendship. I had covered her share of vacation rentals when she was short on cash, paid for expensive dinners when she forgot her wallet, and even helped with her kids' school fees once. I had never asked for any of it back and considered it part of supporting a friend. After Kelly refused to help me, I started reflecting on our friendship and realized it had always been unbalanced. I was always the one reaching out, planning get-togethers, and remembering important dates. Kelly was happy to receive support, but rarely offered it in return. I had been so focused on being a good friend that I hadn't noticed how selfish she actually was. I decided to step back from the friendship and see if Kelly would make any effort to maintain our relationship. She didn't. We went from talking daily to maybe once a month, and those conversations were always initiated by me. Kelly seemed perfectly content to let our 15-year friendship fade away without any discussion or explanation. My husband eventually found a great job, and our financial situation improved significantly. Kelly reached out occasionally with surface-level updates about her life, but we never addressed the elephant in the room about how she had abandoned me during my lowest point. Fast forward to last month when Kelly's world completely fell apart. Her husband of 12 years left her for a younger woman and filed for divorce. Kelly discovered he had been having an affair for over a year and had been hiding money in preparation for leaving her. She was devastated emotionally and facing serious financial hardship as a single mother of 2 young kids. Kelly called me crying hysterically, asking if we could meet for coffee. During our conversation, she poured out all her pain and fear about the divorce. She talked about feeling betrayed and alone and how she didn't know how she was going to manage as a single parent. It was heartbreaking to see someone I had once loved so much in such distress. Then Kelly asked if I could help her in various ways. She wanted me to watch her kids during her divorce meetings, help her move out of the marital home, and provide emotional support during the proceedings. She also hinted that she might need financial assistance with legal fees and living expenses. I felt conflicted because part of me still cared about Kelly and wanted to help her through this crisis, but another part of me remembered how she had treated me when I needed support. I thought about all the times she'd been unavailable when I was struggling and how easily she had let our friendship deteriorate. I told Kelly that I was sorry she was going through such a difficult time, but that I wasn't in a position to provide the level of support she was asking for. I explained that our friendship had changed over the past 2 years and that I didn't feel comfortable taking on such significant responsibilities for someone who hadn't been there for me. Kelly was shocked and accused me of being vindictive and holding grudges. She said that friends should support each other during crisis, regardless of past issues. She reminded me of our long history together and said she couldn't believe I would abandon her when she needed me most. I tried to explain that I wasn't abandoning her out of spite, but that I had learned to protect my energy and only invest in relationships that were truly reciprocal. I said I hoped she would find the support she needed, but that it couldn't come from me given our history. Kelly became angry and said I was a terrible person for kicking her when she was down. She accused me of being petty and jealous of her previous happiness. She said she had always known I was secretly competitive with her and that this was my chance to feel superior while she suffered. Several mutual friends have reached out asking me to reconsider helping Kelly. They say she's going through the worst time of her life and needs all the support she can get. Some have implied that I'm being cruel and unforgiving by refusing to help someone I was once so close to. Others understand my position and think Kelly is getting a taste of what it feels like to need support and not receive it. They point out that she made her choice about our friendship when she abandoned me during my crisis, and now she has to live with the consequences. I keep questioning whether I'm being too harsh by refusing to help Kelly. Maybe I should put aside our past issues and be the bigger person during her time of need, but I also feel like helping her now would just enable her selfish behavior and put me back in a one-sided friendship dynamic. Am I the bad person for not helping my former best friend when her husband left her? Friendship isn't a savings account where you can make withdrawals without deposits. Kelly showed you exactly who she was when you needed her most. And now she's shocked that you remember. Fair weather friends don't get to demand umbrella coverage when their own storms hit. You learned the hard way that true friendship requires mutual support, not just convenience when life is easy. If you enjoyed this batch of stories, consider subscribing for more, as I read Reddit stories just like these every evening. Until then, thank you for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.